The storm buried Ash Hollow so completely that rescue crews later said it looked like the town had been erased from the map. But while families froze in dark houses and the roads disappeared beneath walls of snow taller than pickup trucks, one woman sat safely underground beside a glowing cast-iron stove hidden beneath an old chicken coop, listening to the blizzard rage above her head, while the people who once mocked her desperately searched for a way inside. 10 days earlier, nobody in Ash Hollow, Montana, would have believed that Clara Bennett would become the reason half the town survived the worst winter disaster in decades. At 42 years old, Clara lived alone on the edge of town in the farmhouse her grandparents built after World War II, a weathered white home surrounded by frozen pasture land, old fencing, and a chicken coop that leaned slightly to one side every winter no matter how many times she repaired it. Most people in town considered her strange, though nobody could agree exactly why. Some thought it was because she preferred silence over gossip. Others said it was because she spent too much time reading old survival journals and weather reports instead of attending church socials or football games like everyone else. But the truth was simpler than that. Clara had learned a long time ago that comfort could disappear faster than people imagined. 5 years earlier, after her divorce left her nearly bankrupt, she had spent an entire winter trapped in a tiny apartment during a regional power outage that lasted 6 miserable days. And she never forgot how helpless it felt sitting in the dark waiting for someone else to solve her problems. From that moment on, she promised herself she would never again depend entirely on systems she couldn't control. So when she inherited the farmhouse after her father passed away, she began quietly preparing the property for emergencies in ways nobody around Ash Hollow understood. At first it seemed harmless enough. She planted larger gardens, bought extra propane tanks, installed hand pumps beside the old well. But over time her preparations became harder to ignore, especially after contractors delivered concrete reinforcement panels and ventilation piping to her property during the middle of summer. That was when rumors started spreading across town. People noticed Clara spending nearly every evening inside the chicken coop carrying tools, lumber, buckets, and supplies underground through a hatch hidden beneath stacked feed containers. Wade Mercer, owner of the local feed store and unofficial king of small-town gossip, joked loudly that Clara was building herself a bunker for the zombie apocalypse. The nickname stuck almost immediately. At the diner downtown, people laughed about the chicken coop bunker lady over coffee and pancakes every Friday morning. Teenagers slowed their trucks near her property, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever weird survival cave she was supposedly building underground. One high school kid even posted a blurry video online claiming Clara had enough canned food stored beneath her coop to survive like 30 years. The whole town laughed at that one. Clara ignored all of it. Every morning before sunrise, she fed the chickens, prepared fencing, checked weather charts, and continued working underground with the same calm determination she brought to everything else in life. Beneath the coop, hidden under layers of reinforced earth insulated against brutal Montana winters, she slowly transformed the old root cellar into something remarkable. She built shelves stretching wall to wall and stocked them with canned vegetables, dried beans, flour, oats, rice, powdered milk, medical supplies, lantern fuel, water barrels, blankets, and enough preserved food to feed multiple people for months. She installed a cast-iron cooking stove connected to a narrow vent system disguised beneath the coop's nesting boxes. She added sleeping bunks against the concrete walls and sealed every crack carefully to trap warmth underground. The deeper she worked, the more convinced the town became that Clara Bennett had finally lost her mind completely. Even her younger brother Ethan didn't understand her obsession. One afternoon in late November, he stood inside the coop staring down the hidden staircase while cold wind rattled the wooden walls around them. "You seriously think you'll ever need all this?" he asked, shaking his head. Clara climbed past him carrying another crate of canned peaches. "I think people trust modern life too much," she answered calmly. Ethan laughed softly. "This isn't the frontier anymore, Clara. If something happens, FEMA shows up. The state sends help. We've got snowplows, emergency services, generators." Clara slid the crate carefully onto a shelf underground before answering. "And what happens if those things fail?" Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but stopped because he didn't actually have an answer. That was the difference between Clara and everyone else in Ash Hollow. Most people believed disasters only became dangerous after systems failed. Clara believed real danger started when people assumed systems never would. As December arrived, weather patterns across Montana became increasingly unstable. Temperatures swung wildly between mild afternoons and brutal overnight freezes. Ranchers started noticing strange animal behavior. Birds migrated earlier than normal. Elk herds moved lower into the valleys weeks ahead of schedule. Clara paid attention to every detail. Each night, she studied updated weather models on her aging laptop, while emergency radio broadcasts crackled quietly beside her kitchen table. Then, for days before Christmas, she saw something that made her stomach tighten. A massive Arctic front descending from northern Canada was colliding with a moisture system moving east from the Pacific Northwest, creating the conditions for what meteorologists call a stationary polar cyclone. Most storms move through quickly. This one looked different. The system was slowing instead of advancing, locking into place directly over western Montana. Clara printed every weather chart she could find and spread them across her kitchen table late into the night, while icy wind rattled the farmhouse windows outside. The forecast kept getting worse. Heavy snowfall totals, sustained hurricane-force winds, temperatures dropping below -40. State officials warned residents to avoid travel, but Ash Hollow treated the announcements like every other winter storm advisory. The grocery store stayed busy with holiday shoppers. Christmas lights glowed across town. Wade Mercer laughed at the warnings while loading deer feed outside his store. "Weather guys panic every winter," he told customers confidently. "Storm will blow over in a day or two." But Clara noticed something nobody else seemed willing to admit. Supplies in a town had already slowed. Fuel deliveries were delayed. Highway crews were stretched thin across multiple counties preparing for the storm. If conditions became severe enough, Ash Hollow could end up isolated completely. So while the rest of town prepared for Christmas, Clara prepared for survival. She filled every water container underground, checked the ventilation system twice, brought fresh firewood beneath the coop, and sealed emergency medical kits inside waterproof containers. On the final evening before the storm arrived, snow began falling softly across the valley while Christmas lights twinkled peacefully through town. Clara stood alone inside the chicken coop listening to distant wind moving across the mountains. Then she pulled the hidden hatch closed behind her, climbed down into the underground kitchen glowing warmly beneath the earth, and locked the heavy door overhead while the first real gusts of the coming blizzard began to shake the coop above her. By the fourth day of the blizzard, people in Ash Hollow stopped checking the clocks because time no longer seemed to matter once the power failed, the roads vanished, and the cold became something alive that crept through walls hunting for weaknesses. But beneath an old chicken coop at the edge of town, Clara Bennett calmly stirred a pot of venison stew over a cast-iron stove, while frightened families huddled underground realizing the woman they mocked for years might be the only reason they survived it all. The storm arrived faster than anyone expected. What began as steady snowfall the night before Christmas transformed by dawn into a violent white wall swallowing everything in sight. Wind screamed across the valley hard enough to shake entire houses while snow buried fences, vehicles, and roads within hours. At first, nobody panicked. Ash Hollow had survived winter storms before. Families stayed indoors drinking coffee beside fireplaces, while local radio stations assured everyone the county snowplows were already working. But by noon, the situation worsened dramatically. Visibility dropped to almost nothing as snow drifted faster than crews could clear it. Highway patrol officers abandoned multiple rescue attempts after vehicles became trapped in chest-high drifts outside town. Then the temperature collapsed. -20, then -30 by sunset. Power lines coated in thick ice snapped one after another across the valley, plunging entire neighborhoods into darkness while emergency generators groaned under the strain of constant use. Clara listened carefully to every radio broadcast from her underground kitchen while calmly organizing supplies beneath the coop. The earth surrounding the shelter insulated it naturally, trapping warmth from the cast-iron stove and keeping temperatures stable despite the deadly cold raging above ground. Lantern light flickered softly across shelves packed with canned food, blankets, water barrels, and neatly stacked firewood, while wind howled through the night overhead like an approaching freight train. She had prepared for exactly this scenario for years, though even she underestimated how quickly conditions outside would collapse. On the second day, emergency services announced over shortwave radio that all highways leading into Ash Hollow were officially impassable. Snowplows had stalled. Fuel deliveries stopped completely. Several ranches outside town lost communication entirely after cell towers froze and backup systems failed. The county sheriff urged residents to remain indoors and conserve heat because rescue operations could no longer continue safely. Then even the radio station went silent. That was when fear truly settled across Ash Hollow. Without electricity, most homes cooled rapidly in the brutal temperatures. Pipes burst inside walls. Generators froze solid overnight as fuel lines gelled in the extreme cold. Families burned furniture and fireplaces trying desperately to stay warm, while grocery store shelves emptied within hours after panicked residents raided supplies before conditions became impossible. Meanwhile, underground, Clara remained disciplined and methodical. She rationed propane carefully, monitored water usage twice daily, and maintained strict routines to avoid wasting energy. Every task had purpose. Every supply had been planned months in advance. She cooked slowly over the stove, kept ventilation pathways clear, and slept in short shifts while the storm battered the coop above her relentlessly. Then, shortly after midnight on the third day, frantic pounding echoed through the floor overhead. Clara immediately grabbed her lantern and climbed the narrow staircase toward the hidden hatch beneath the feed cabinet. The moment she opened it, freezing wind exploded into the coop carrying snow and ice with it. Standing outside was Ethan, barely recognizable beneath layers of frost-covered clothing. His wife Megan clutched their 6-year-old daughter Lily tightly against her chest, while all three trembled violently from the cold. Their trailer lost power the previous afternoon, and when the backup propane heater failed overnight, indoor temperatures dropped below freezing within hours. Ethan's truck became stuck less than a mile from Clara's farm after snowdrifts swallowed the road completely, forcing them to walk through near whiteout conditions just to reach her property alive. For a moment, Ethan simply stared at his sister with exhausted shame filling his face because he remembered every joke he had made about her underground shelter over the past year. "Please," he whispered through chattering teeth. Clara didn't hesitate. She pulled them inside immediately and sealed the coop door behind them before leading them down into the warmth below. Lily's eyes widened in disbelief the moment she entered the underground kitchen. Warm lanterns glowed against concrete walls lined with shelves of food stretching in every direction. Soup simmered gently atop the stove while blankets rested neatly beside insulated bunks built into the walls. The underground shelter felt less like a bunker and more like a hidden farmhouse untouched by the storm outside. Megan burst into tears almost instantly from relief alone. Ethan stood speechless while Clara handed him dry clothes and hot coffee, without saying a word about the months of ridicule. By morning, conditions above ground had become catastrophic. Snowdrifts reached nearly 12 feet in parts of town. Several roofs collapsed under the weight of accumulated ice and snow. Livestock froze in unheated barns. One family became trapped inside their garage overnight after drafts sealed every exit completely shut. Rumors spread through crackling battery radios that multiple people were suffering severe frostbite after attempting to walk for help during the storm. Then another knock came at the coop door. This time it was Wade Mercer. The same man who spent months turning Clara into the town joke now stood half-frozen beside the chicken coop, with tears literally frozen against his beard. His generator failed 2 nights earlier, and the feed store lost heat shortly afterward. He had spent hours trying to keep pipes from freezing before finally realizing he was losing the battle against the cold. Clara opened the hatch and looked at him silently, while wind screamed across the dark pasture behind him. Wade couldn't even meet her eyes. "I didn't know where else to go," he admitted quietly. Clara studied him for a long moment, remembering every laugh inside the diner, every cruel joke told at her expense, every customer he entertained by mocking the chicken coop bunker lady. Then she stepped aside anyway, because survival mattered more to her than pride ever would. Over the following days, more desperate neighbors arrived through the storm seeking shelter underground after hearing rumors that Clara somehow still had heat, food, and running water. Families crowded together beneath the coop, while the blizzard buried Ash Hollow deeper each hour. Clara organized sleeping rotations, ration schedules, cooking duties, and sanitation routines with calm authority that slowly kept panic from spreading. Outside, the town disappeared beneath endless snow and deadly silence. But underground, hidden beneath a weathered chicken coop everyone once laughed at, warmth and life still survived. By the 9th day of the blizzard, the people hiding beneath Clara Bennett's chicken coop no longer laughed about the underground kitchen because the storm outside had become something terrifyingly close to the end of the world. And while Ash Hollow sat buried beneath nearly 15 feet of snow, with frozen houses scattered across the valley like abandoned tombs, the only place that still felt alive was the hidden shelter beneath the coop, where lanterns glowed softly against concrete walls and the woman everyone once mocked quietly kept them alive, one careful decision at a time. Time underground settled into routines that made survival possible. Clara enforced structure with the same calm discipline she had used while building the shelter itself. Breakfast happened at sunrise no matter how dark the storm remained above them. Water usage was tracked twice daily. Firewood was rationed carefully. Every person had responsibilities because Clara understood something the others were only beginning to realize. Fear spread faster when people had nothing to do except think about dying. So Ethan helped maintain the ventilation system hidden beneath the nesting boxes upstairs. Megan organized food inventory beside the storage shelves. Wade hauled melted snow into backup barrels and monitored lantern oil levels every evening without being asked twice. Even little Lily contributed by helping stack blankets and keeping track of canned goods using colored markers Clara gave her. The routines kept everyone focused, but the storm never stopped reminding them how fragile their safety really was. Above ground, hurricane-force winds continued hammering Ash Hollow day and night, while temperatures remained cold enough to kill someone within minutes of exposure. Sometimes the coop trembled violently overhead as snow buried it deeper against the earth. Other times, strange cracking noises echoed through the darkness as trees snapped beneath the weight of ice outside. Every sound made people glance nervously toward the ceiling, wondering if the storm might finally crush the shelter itself. But Clara never panicked. That was what amazed everyone most. Even after days trapped underground with frightened families depending entirely on her preparations, she moved through the shelter with quiet steadiness that somehow made the fear manageable for everyone else too. One night, while most of the group slept beneath piles of blankets beside the warm stove, Wade sat awake watching Clara update inventory notes beneath lantern light at the far end of the kitchen. The flickering glow illuminated rows of canned vegetables, preserved meat, flour sacks, and water containers surrounding her like the inside of some forgotten frontier outpost untouched by modern life. Finally, Wade broke the silence. "Why'd you keep helping people after the way we treated you?" Clara paused briefly but didn't look up from her notebook. "Because storms don't care who is right before they arrive," she answered quietly. Wade swallowed hard, shame washing visibly across his exhausted face. "I made your life miserable in town." Clara finally looked at him then, not angry, just tired. "Most people are comfortable mocking preparation," she said softly. "It lets them believe bad things only happen to paranoid people." Wade stared at the glowing stove for a long moment before speaking again. "Truth is, I think we mocked you because deep down we knew you were taking responsibility for things the rest of us ignored." Clara said nothing after that because there wasn't really anything left to say. Outside, the storm continued raging across the frozen valley while the underground kitchen remained the last pocket of warmth for miles. On the morning of the 10th day, something changed. At first nobody noticed it except Clara. She paused while preparing breakfast and tilted her head slightly toward the ceiling. The others slowly fell silent too. The constant screaming wind above the coop had weakened. The violent shaking of the structure overhead stopped almost completely. For the first time in over a week, Ash Hollow sounded quiet. Nobody moved for several seconds because silence itself felt unfamiliar now. Then, faintly in the distance, came a sound so unexpected that Megan immediately burst into tears. Helicopters. Rescue crews. Ethan scrambled up the staircase toward the hatch, while Clara followed close behind. Together they forced open the coop entrance against packed snow and climbed outside into a world almost unrecognizable beneath mountains of white. Entire sections of fencing had vanished completely. Snowdrifts towered above the farmhouse windows. Several neighboring buildings had collapsed entirely under the weight of ice and snow. But across the valley, military helicopters circled slowly through the pale gray sky, while National Guard vehicles pushed carefully through partially cleared roads below. Ash Hollow had finally been reached. Over the next several hours, rescue teams moved house to house, searching for survivors trapped by the storm. What they found shocked even experienced emergency crews. Frozen plumbing had destroyed dozens of homes. Livestock lay buried beneath collapsed barns. Fuel shortages crippled rescue operations during the worst days of the blizzard, leaving the town isolated far longer than anyone imagined possible. Yet amid all the devastation, one story spread quickly through the exhausted responders. A woman had sheltered nearly a dozen people underground beneath her chicken coop for 10 straight days using a hidden winter kitchen nobody in town had taken seriously until it saved their lives. Reporters arrived only 2 days later once roads partially reopened. News stations across Montana aired footage of Clara's underground shelter, while stunned journalists described the hidden kitchen built beneath the old coop. Videos showing shelves packed with preserved food, the cast-iron stove, insulated sleeping bunks, and concealed ventilation systems exploded online almost overnight. Headlines called Clara everything from the Montana survival woman to the chicken coop hero. But the moment people remembered most happened outside the diner in downtown Ash Hollow during a televised interview when Wade Mercer stood before cameras and publicly admitted the truth. "We laughed at her," he said plainly while snow still covered the town behind him. "Every single one of us thought she was crazy. Meanwhile, she was the only person prepared when everything failed." His voice cracked slightly before he continued. "If Clara Bennett hadn't built that shelter, some of us wouldn't be standing here right now." The town changed after that winter. Families built emergency food storage rooms. Backup heating systems sold out across the county. The local school even introduced disaster preparedness classes inspired by Clara's underground design. But Clara herself avoided attention whenever possible. Once the roads reopened fully and life slowly returned to normal, she went back to repairing fences, feeding chickens, and quietly restocking supplies beneath the coop exactly as she had before the storm ever came. One evening near the end of winter, Lily followed Clara underground while she organized newly canned vegetables along the shelves. The little girl looked around the warm hidden kitchen with wide, curious eyes. "Are you still going to keep all this stuff forever?" she asked. Clara smiled faintly while placing another jar carefully into storage. "Probably." Lily frowned thoughtfully. "Even if another giant storm never comes." Clara glanced slowly around the underground kitchen that had protected them when the world above nearly froze solid. Then she looked gently at her niece. "The people who survive disasters aren't usually the strongest," she said quietly. "They're the ones who prepared before everyone else thought it mattered." Then she closed the pantry door softly while winter wind whispered across the snow-covered chicken coop overhead.